Hey guys, welcome to part one of my conversation with poet, author, and podcaster Megha Rao. I talked to her about really channeling her own unique creative voice, how she deals with being present rather than trying to stay positive, and how she's truly been able to stay authentic in the middle of all that goes on around you. I'm Varun Dugirala, and this is Take a Pause. And before we hit play on the conversation, I want you to smash that bell icon and hit subscribe, or rather, hit subscribe and then smash that bell icon. And right after that, heading over to my chat with Mika. This is a chat I've been contemplating for a while, and I spoke to Peter, who I think very sweetly introduced us because I've been following your I do I call it poetry? Do I call it content? I think I've been consuming most of the stuff you create. And one of the things that I really am intrigued by is understanding the processes of creative people and some people who are considered truly creative. So, firstly, thank you for coming on the show, Mega. I'm super excited for where this chat, what rabbit holes this chat might lead us through. And I'm also catching you at a time when you're on a bit of a break from all things social media and everything else. So, um, thank you for taking time away from your digital detox to do this.
Thank you so much for having me, Varun. And you're right. I'm not sure if I can call it a digital detox. What I can call it actually, because a break sometimes you want to go cold turkey on something, but you find yourself coming back to it, and that's when you realize, okay, I might be addicted to this. I don't know, but I'm trying my best to do this detox and also this social media break. I think one of the first things that I did was get myself a dumb phone. It was
Mhm.
incredibly tedious because you realize it's not just about social media. You don't have a Swiggy on it, you don't have an Uber on it, you don't even have like a camera on it, so
Yeah.
you can't take any photos. But it was a very wholesome experience because I found myself being very present, and I say that in the most non-romantic, non-glorified way. I also found myself reading this book called How to Do Nothing. It's
Mm.
about beating the attention economy. It's by Jenny Odell. It's a
Yeah.
really
My sister
insightful
sent
book.
me that because she says I've spent too
Ah.
much time watching and just basically being on the phone, and she literally sent me this book saying this is the book you of all people need to read. So I know what you
did
mean.
she find you? Did she find you sitting at the dinner table on your phone, not talking to her? Is that what happened?
My sister realized that I'm obsessed with the phone. We don't live in the same country.
Hmm.
She lives in London, and but she's like I know how much because whenever she's visited, she's seen me just like walk around with the phone half the time, or doing something, or watching me on social media, or creating content. So she's like, "Can you just like stop?" I think that's why she
But I
sent me
think
this.
for artists, so much of our work is also integrated with the
Mm.
internet, especially during times like these. So
Yeah.
sometimes it does feel impossible. And even when I'm saying I'm taking a break, I know that comes with a lot of privilege because I know I can do it versus someone
Mm.
who's just started out and needs to put out work, put out their art out there, and they're trying to like get an audience for it. um, or even someone who has a very big audience and grew
Mm.
their audience on, let's say, like a Twitter or an Instagram, and now it's just difficult for them to step back from it because almost, you get work DMs, you get that
Mm.
happens, right?
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah. All
hard
the
to
time.
dissociate yourself from it.
You know, you mentioned being present, and I feel that that's a term which I always think about it as just being there for people or just being there for yourself. I came across something very interesting some time back. It spoke about having present thinking versus positive thinking, and I found that super interesting because it said that what you're feeling right now might not be positive, but it's present is where you are right now. So when you're present with yourself, like you said, you've been able to kind of have that. How you seen that? Like, how does that help you reflect on yourself? How does that help you reflect on just your headspace and everything else?
Before I go there, I also wanted to add, a lot of people talk about positive thinking,
Mm.
and I know you mentioned it right now, being present versus positive thinking.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you're going through something, like which is what most of the population is going through right now because of the pandemic. You're
Yeah.
going through something, and it's not easy to just feel positive, right? Sometimes when you force yourself to feel positive, that leads to toxic positivity in a way where you don't address underlying feelings or emotions. So I think the best way forward for us would be present thinking, like you
Mhm.
mentioned,
Yeah.
and rather than positive thinking, which is why I try to stray away from that as much as possible, even when I create episodes for poems to come down to.
Mhm.
Because I know that, okay, sometimes it could sound very fluffy, it could sound very, you know, sweet and good, and it might, you know, dismiss the reality that the world may not necessarily be a great place for
Yeah.
most of us right now.
Yeah.
But I think it's just important to stay grounded and focused on, yeah, this is real, and um, I can't cross that. I want to be happy. I want to be in a safe space. I want to be healthy, but I don't want to fake positivity when I'm not feeling it.
Mm.
And that's one thing I realized when I started being more mindful, when I started, like stepping back from everything. I had a lot of time to focus on myself. And by that, I
Mm.
don't mean, okay, I sat and I explored all these new talents and hobbies. I just mean that there was my voice in my head versus, let's say, like millions of other people's voices, small, small voices feeding into my thoughts, giving me opinions, ideas, you know, and information that I don't even know if it's true. So, taking a step back reduced the noise for sure. And being present was also just observing.
Mm.
I think that when I'm, you know, not on my phone and I'm not distracted, I'm indulging in deep work, which is something Cal Newport said, right? He
Yeah.
said
Yeah.
that a lot of us run on the surface, in the shallow. I mean, on the surface because we're so distracted. There are so many things happening around us all the time. But when you indulge in deep work, you're giving your 100% to that one thing that you're doing at that moment, even if it means washing the dishes or watching TV, whatever it is. No distractions. And I think that's one thing that I learned. I learned to just give my 100% for whatever small thing that I was doing. And that was very insightful for me.
You mentioned washing dishes, and I have a theory, and I think in some parts I feel like I've been proven right, is that when you're doing something really mundane, and it's
Mhm.
been something which I've realized that when you're doing something which is a very regular task, right? You're doing just washing dishes, you are maybe just helping clean stuff at home, or just like folding clothes. I feel the best ideas kind of come to me at moments like that. You're doing something so mundane that it is by far the best time for your brain to kind of like really have on like 20 light bulbs going off. Do you find that as well? Do you have certain things that you kind of do which kind of spark creativity in you, or are there other things that you find to be bigger sparks?
I think it's a mix of both. Like, adventure definitely does push me into opening up my mind. But at the same time, when I'm immersed in the ordinary, I think I could come up with some really extraordinary things even then. I've started believing that even the ordinary could be really extraordinary.
Mm-hmm.
Like something brilliant could come out of washing the dishes, or
Yeah,
maybe nothing at all, and that's okay too. Like,
yeah.
you don't have to be creating or indulging in an idea all the time. You could have an idea and just leave it there and do nothing for that day, and maybe it comes back to you later or doesn't. It doesn't matter.
And I think that the beauty of that, actually the beauty of what you created, and especially your podcast has had like it's been an instigator many times for me to kind of think about life and think about many things and etc. But I want to go back to the first ever episode you did, which was I don't know if that's the first one recorded, but it's the first one. I went back to the first one, which is about taking a pause. Um, and there were many things you spoke about there, and I'm kind of circling back to the pause part before we move on to other points. Um, what do you feel has happened every time you've taken a pause at different stages of your creative journey? Have you seen that what you get out of it is different, or have you seen some things kind of staying the same? What have you kind of seen over there?
I think that once a writer has discovered his or her voice, or a creator has discovered his or her or their voice, um, there you're going to hold on to that for sure. But at the same time, there's going to be a lot of experimentation. I think it's so important to have room for experimentation. I see writers and artists stereotyping themselves, putting themselves in a box once
Mm.
something works. Oh, okay, this got 1 million. I'm just going 1 million views.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just going to do that for the rest of my life. And, this is my calling.
Yeah.
I think that while an audience gets to decide what hits a 1 million listen,
Mm.
and what doesn't make it, we also need to look towards internal validation. And
Mm.
that's something I'm doing right now. Like, it's so hard when you're exposed to the world to not care about external validation, which is why
Yeah.
it's also so important to just be away for a while. And I think that people are in such a mad hurry, this hustle culture.
Mm.
A lot of people say that this is toxic, but they don't do anything about it. They're just like, oh my god, this is killing me, this is so bad, this is not healthy, but they never stop. And that's not their fault, because it's kind of become this slot machine where they're getting instant validation, and it's become a sort of rat race. So they feel pressurized to not stop. If they stop, then someone else might take that place. And it's disappointing that that's what we've become. But at the same time, for someone like me, an artist, I think if I don't want to become the kind of artist who seeks external validation. I mean,
Mm.
sure,
We
we
all
all
want it
want
secretly. Yeah.
our work to be accepted for
Yeah.
sure, but at the same time, not at the cost of our artistic integrity, right? And I think that's why it's so important. I just take a step back, I read a bunch of books every day. I do the things that I don't get the time for. I don't ever want to end up writing more than I read. I don't think
Mm.
anyone should do that. And even for creators, look at other stuff, go back and see who created the history of what you're doing.
Yeah.
I go back to my classics, I read everything that the history of literature has to offer me, and that's how I write. Writing just doesn't come from personal experiences and, you know, whatever you've learned in life. It doesn't work that way. It's just part of it. That's what helps you define your voice. But I don't know, when it comes to everything matters. You need inspiration. You need to look at what other artists are doing, even the ones deceased.
I want to take a little deeper into finding your voice, right? And I feel that's especially in today's time, like you just mentioned, right? It's so easy for us to say, "Oh, this is what's working," or like this is what the most popular, let's say, YouTubers or podcasters are doing. Let's follow that. And in middle of that, sometimes you kind of, and I've seen some of the best creators kind of turn around at some point in time, say, "I don't know what my voice is anymore," right? You kind of go down that alley so far that you don't know how to go back. Uh, how do you kind of, if you have to answer someone who's asking today, I'm starting today, I want to figure out what my voice is, what would you tell them? What would you turn to them and say, how do they kind of find what is authentically them?
As far as my journey of discovering my voice went, I think so much of it has to do with just understanding yourself. It's very easy to be sidetracked by looking at someone else doing something and thinking, "Oh, that's working. I want to do that too."
Hmm.
And you know that the minute someone some a particular kind of art goes up, there will be like 100 other people suddenly joining the bandwagon and going with the flow. Like Rupi Kaur came
Yeah.
into vogue, and suddenly there were like a lot of people writing, let's say, like very short poetry in a similar fashion, white background, two lines,
Yeah.
artwork. And I think that's where voice gets lost. For someone, that could be their voice, but for someone else, that could just be, let's say, imitation.
Hmm.
And I think voice just comes from that very raw, authentic space. Um, Maybe it has so much to do with who you are. It
Hmm.
definitely has so much to do with who you
Yeah.
are.
Yeah.
When I started writing, I didn't set out thinking, oh, these are the themes that I'll write about. I want to write in a fierce and powerful way. Not really.
Hmm.
I would even go as far as saying that Before college, the kind of writing that I used to do was very cheesy, cute stuff, which is, I mean, it's just amazing. I think that all art is beautiful. But then I went to college and I went through a lot of stuff that was incredibly painful. And I think that kind of trauma changed me. And when I changed, my writing changed as well. It
Mm,
changed so much. It had lost its innocence, it had lost that sweetness, it had become dark and, painful. It seemed like this open wound.
mm,
And with time, when that started settling, when things started getting better, I started growing my hair. I became, just an overall healthier person. That's when poems to come down to happen, right? Then,
mm,
and you don't see that kind of insanely dark poetry there,
mm.
but you also don't see something that's sweet
Fluff.
and
Yeah.
cute. Yeah, you don't see that. You see more like, you see wisdom, and
Mm,
you see a lot of other things. And I think, but at the same time, that doesn't mean that throughout all of this, I, you know, my writing changed completely. It was not like a 180, 360, I don't know. But it didn't change completely. It
mm,
changed in many ways. But at the bottom of it, at the heart of it, you could find brutal honesty no matter what. You could find this fascination for exaggeration and metaphors. For a long time when I
mm,
was writing metaphors into my poetry, I didn't even know I was doing that. I had a friend tell me, I want to find my voice. You have such a unique voice. The minute I read your poem, you don't even have to tell me it's yours. I know it's yours because you use all these metaphors. And that's when I actually went back and read my poems and I thought, oh, that's right. I tend to not call a spade a spade.
yeah.
Instead of saying, oh, that sunset is beautiful, I end up calling it God spilling wine on this guy's party dress and, all sorts of exaggerated stuff. And I think it's a journey, and I think it's so important to read a lot of people to understand what kind of writing you like. And this is not specific to writing, right? It could be any art, it could be
Mm,
anything. I know I read a lot of writers and I was able to pick from that why what I loved about that book, what I hated about that book, and then I'd be like, okay, I'm going to take the part which I love, which is, let's say, maybe the simplicity of that work.
mm,
I'm going to be that way. What did I hate about it? It's dragging. I don't like the ending. Okay, I want like an ending with a punch. So these are things you just figure out along the way. But when you're exposed to too much information all the time, when you don't get time to sit with yourself, when you're, growing up, I don't know how people grow up on the internet. Like as a millennial,
I
it
agree.
was difficult, but Gen Z, I'm terrified for them. Like I'm genuinely terrified for them.
Yeah. And that's such an important point. And I think we all grew up without, I mean, even when we got it at some point, it was like
Yeah.
dial up and you couldn't see half the things which were there on screen because nothing was buffering. But when I actually think about, like, and someone asked me the other day, said, how do I acquire wisdom was a question I got, right? And I'm like,
Wow.
that's such a tricky question to answer. So I thought about it for a bit, and I generally try to respond to as many DMs, especially when someone who's young writing in. And I was like, you only acquire wisdom by really like keeping your eyes and ears open as you go through life, right? And that's literally what I turned around and said, because what you just said about how you progressed as an artist is because as you progress through life, you learn things, you evolve things, and you move ahead, and that just changes so many parts of it. Like when you were talking about having fluffy poetry, I went through a Jim Morrison poetry phase in my life, which is by far one of the worst things I could have done. Like I go back, I still have that book somewhere, right? And my friends used to laugh at me saying, dude, he's not a good poet. I'm like, but I still want to write like him. So I tried to write like him. I would shoot those, random shadowy videos of myself talking about them, reading them out and stuff like that. But I think that phase was important for me to get let a lot of the randomness out. Whereas now when I'm sitting down and writing, I'm writing from a very like, okay, this is what I've been through and this is what I feel about today is like. And I feel the problem with the internet is we see so much there. We want to sound like the people whose content we consume. So trying to ape someone. Thank you so much for listening to part one of my conversation with Megha Rao. If you want to continue listening to this and rather watching more of this, then make sure you hit subscribe and smash that bell icon because part two is dropping very soon on Take a Pause with me, Varun Girala.